It was a terrifying situation for thousands of people. Gunmen in the neighborhood killing individuals in a methodical way. When the news got on the radio and the television, people were too frightened to go outside. It happened again and again and again. This is what it's been like in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is basically part of Washington. ABC's Barry Serafin is our reporter there tonight. Barry?
Well, Peter, virtually every law enforcement agency in this area, including local police, the FBI, U.S. Marshals, and Secret Service, is looking for whoever is responsible for the worst murder spree that has ever happened here, including a murder today at the service station behind me. The shooting started yesterday at 5:20 p.m. A bullet went through a window of this store, narrowly missing a clerk inside. It was the only miss. At 6:04 p.m., a middle-aged white man was killed outside of the supermarket. This morning, the murders resumed. At 7:41 a.m., another white man mowing his lawn. At 8:12 a.m., an Indian man gassing up his cab. Minutes later, at 8:37, an Hispanic woman sitting reading a book on a bench outside of a restaurant.
The young lady that I just seen about 5 minutes or 10 minutes ago off the bus was laying right there, and it was just terrible.
Just over an hour later, at 9:58 a.m., another single bullet, another victim, a woman cleaning her car at a gas station. Altogether, 6 shots, 5 apparently random victims within 16 hours. Police are stopped.
Nothing like this has ever happened in Montgomery County. This is a very safe community. Our homicide rate just increased by 25% in one day.
Law enforcement sources say the weapon was a high-power rifle, fired in some cases at least from a distance.
We feel like we probably have a skilled shooter, and that does heighten our concern, heighten our concern, heighten our concern, heighten our concern.
"15 dead, 23 wounded, shot with planning and precision, without conscience or prejudice, shooting at random, irrespective of race or gender. Their victims were young, old, black, white, male, female. The Washington snipers were 41-year-old John Allen Muhammad and his 17-year-old accomplice Lee Boyd Malvo. If their paths had never crossed, would they have murdered so many, or were they born to kill?" October 2002, ordinary Americans feared for their lives, too frightened to put petrol in their cars or let their children play outdoors. For 23 horrific days, a series of random sniper killings terrorized Washington, D.C. A walk down the high street would be a gamble with life and death.
These 2 individuals were cold-blooded murderers. They didn't care about who they killed.
No one really expected that it would be a man and a boy working together as a sniper team.
Well, I think people began to be scared when they realized that the shootings were random. You had to come to grips with the fact that there could be somebody pointing a gun at you as you sat in your car.
They were just picking people at random. If you were out there where they could get to you, you were gone.
Malvo's partner in crime was 24 years his senior. Born in New Orleans, John Williams changed his name to John Muhammad when he converted to Islam in the mid-80s. Washington Times reporter John Ward recalls the details of Muhammad's mysterious childhood, which were mentioned briefly at the trial.
He was very affected by his mother dying when he was very young, and he was also picked on a lot as a kid by relatives. And I think he went through his entire life feeling like He was never recognized for his potential, he was never recognized for his talent, and he could have been something a lot greater than he turned out to be.
John married Mildred, his second wife, in 1988. Together they had 3 children. Those who knew him felt that he was a good father. Mechanic Robert Holmes met John in 1985 during their stints in the Army at Fort Lewis.
Everybody thought it was the perfect family, you know. She came up here, they ended up getting married. Then little John was born, and subsequently 2 daughters afterwards. But I mean, he was always a little bit of a womanizer, but at the same time, he took care of his family. I'd say he was a disciplinarian, same way as I am with my child. I mean, but it wasn't like abusive, strict. It was more nurturing, you know. I never saw John yell at his children. If there was something that was that he didn't feel they had done right, he would talk to them, you know. And so it wasn't like, here you go. It wasn't like a scream or anything. I never saw him do that with his children.
One person who also witnessed firsthand the love John expressed for his children was Jerry O'Neill, his local barber for over 11 years.
John never raised his voice at the kids while they were in the shop. They were always mannerable. They sit, he would speak to them. They say, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Mildred was a strong woman, too. I saw more of her influence on her family than John. Like I said, John was quiet. He'd come in, Mildred wanted his hair a certain way, and that was it.
For most of their married life, John was a combat engineer in the National Guard. When he was away, he desperately missed his children.
He didn't like being in the military. It was something that he had committed himself to doing. And at the time, I think it provided a living for him and his family, and that's what he did.
He learned how to fire a weapon. He was highly trained in sniper tactics. His experience in the Gulf, we don't know exactly what that did to him, but again, there was talk of neurological damage from chemicals. And his wife, when he came back from the Gulf, said that she noticed a change in him, that he became angrier and darker.
On leaving the military, John began to feel bitter towards his country and the army. This would eventually turn into angry resentment towards his wife. Lee was encouraged to watch films such as The Matrix and play sniper video games repeatedly. Experts would later conclude that this was to ensure that the young, impressionable Lee was desensitized to the events that would later unfold.
Well, he liked games that had a lot of high adrenaline, you know, games that really amped you up, you know.
They had a demanding daily routine of exercise and a restricted diet.
They were doing some kind of special diet because they were taking something to like cleanse their body, and they were both eating honey and crackers.
They had this belief that you should only eat once a day, that somehow it was more efficient for your digestive system.
On February the 16th, 2002, 2 days before Malvo's 17th birthday, John Mohammed gave him his first big test. John was angry with a friend of his ex-wife, Isla Nichols, so he sent his young apprentice to kill her. Lee was not to know that Nichols' 21-year-old niece, Kenya Cook, would be home. On opening the front door, Cook was shot in the face with a single bullet. Lee Malvo had made his first kill. From February to October 2002, they ricocheted around the United States, robbing and killing people as their needs or desires demanded. They eventually arrived in Washington, DC, home of the White House, and soon to become home to one of the worst shooting sprees in American history. On the morning of October the 3rd, 2002, the Washington rush hour was reaching its height. The major highways on the 64-mile beltway that rings the capital were full of people going to work. Sergeant Roger Thompson was the lead investigator on the case. He knows each crime scene intimately.
There are a lot of people out. Just another one of the strange facets about this case is that no one, with all the eyes and all the ears and all the people driving around, nobody actually saw them shoot anyone.
Mohammed and Malvo would drive the streets until they found a possible target. Once they were in position, Mohammed would keep watch from the driver's seat, whilst Malvo would climb from the front, lift up the back seat cushion and slide into the Caprice's boot. Their first target was 39-year-old landscaper James Buchanan, also known as Sonny. His sister Vicky describes him as a generous man.
Sonny was my youngest brother. He was my best friend, and we were confidants, and he just had a love for life and for people.
James Buchanan was mowing this lawn right here, this grass, and he was walking in that direction.
Malvo watched and waited, focusing through the gun's scope, his breathing controlled. Once he had the command from Mohammed, he pulled the trigger.
The lawnmower kept going, and then he ran down this sidewalk and into this parking lot here for the car dealership and collapsed in front of 2 employees.
The bullet hit Sonny between his left shoulder blade and his spine. He was rushed to hospital, but died a few hours later.
I knew, as soon as I went to the door, she had his license, and I knew that it was like a nightmare, that you don't want to wake up from.
But Buchanan wouldn't be the only person to die at the hands of the snipers that day. It was the start of 3 weeks of unimaginable terror.
Now here's the mobile station here on the left, and that center island with the 2 pumps there, his car was facing inward, facing towards the store. He had a car that the gas pump was under the license plate in the back. So he was pumping his gas there, and the shot came from across the street.
The doctor on the scene tried to revive Prem Kumar Walekar, but it was no use. The powerful .223 bullet ripped through his heart and lung, and Prem Kumar died at the scene. Just 25 minutes later, Sarah Ramos, a housekeeper and nanny, was quietly sitting on a bench reading a book while she waited for her boss to pick her up.
Distance from the shooter's vehicle and Sarah Ramos is about the same as the other ones that we had that morning and subsequent shootings that occurred in the Washington, D.C. area. It was between 80 and 90 yards, sometimes a little closer, sometimes a little further away. The bullet went right through her and went right through the plate glass window, crisp and juicy, and we were able to recover a pretty pristine projectile that matched up to the rifle.
An hour later, 25-year-old Lori Lewis Rivera was shot as she vacuumed her car at a petrol station. 12 hours after that, 72-year-old Pascal Chano was killed whilst crossing the street. 5 people killed, numerous lives altered forever. But it was only just the beginning for 2 men who were on a mission to cause as much chaos and devastation as possible.
Your children are not safe anywhere at any time.
Dr. Evan Nelson is a clinical psychologist who has evaluated over 400 murder cases. He explains what may have been going through the killer's minds.
Clearly, there's an extraordinary degree of planning, and I think that really differentiates this case from other types of murder cases where planning is not the element. The reality is that most murders have about 30 seconds of planning, if that at all.
Throughout the ordeal, Mohammed and Malvo left various notes for the police. They demanded $10 million to stop their reign of terror. They were also keeping a close eye on news reports. This was evident in this restaurant's CCTV footage.
Standing there at the front reception area, and a news report came on about the sniper story. He walked over to the television that was hanging over the bar and actually reached up and turned up the sound so he could listen to the story.
Well, the people who are interested in notoriety are usually flirting with the media. They're sending letters. For example, here in the United States, there's just been an apprehension of the BTK, blind, torture, and kill serial murderer. This is an individual who wrote letters to the media taunting the police, taunting the community, as compared to leaving a covert and specific letter just for the police, as Malvo and Mohammed did. I don't see any signs that these 2 men were taking an especial pleasure in killing so much as a pleasure in shooting precisely, implementing a plan so perfectly that they weren't caught.
The police may have been closing in on the suspects, but they had not stopped the killing. On the morning of October the 22nd, 2002, the kindly bus driver who helped so many of his frightened passengers through these 3 weeks of terror was standing on the front steps of his bus. His name was Conrad Johnson. He was 35 years old and had a wife and 2 young children. At 5:55 a.m., a gunshot rang out from the woods opposite. Conrad staggered back and fell into the aisle. This would be the last killing. Their deadly partnership, resulting in 23 shootings and 15 deaths, was over.
I was just watching the news one day and they said that they had caught them. And I don't think I saw his face. They just said his name. And it kind of just, I was like, well, how do I know that name? It was Lee Malvo, you know, it's not your most common name in the world. And I just kept thinking, where do I know that from? And it all kind of clicked in my head and I was like, oh my gosh, this cannot be happening. This, you know, how weird is that? Our little tiny corner of the world, this guy was in my class and now he's killed 13 people.
Mohammed and Malvo were arrested and their car was thoroughly searched. The police uncovered vital circumstantial evidence.
Some of the items of evidence that were collected within the vehicle at the time of the arrest were, for instance, the Sony Vaio computer that was located in the front seat of the vehicle. And there were several items that they had that worked with the computer. They had a solar charger. I don't know how well it worked, but they had one. They also, with the Sony Vaio computer, they were keeping logs and they kind of kept a little bit with track of the areas that they felt were important. Areas that they had scouted out as being strong possible areas where they could wreak the most havoc.
They also found maps marking not only the places where people had already been shot, but also where they planned future killings.
There were lots of bags of clothing, personal items that they had. They had lots of vitamins, and they were trying to sustain themselves in water. The weapon that was used, the Bushmaster 223, with the halo sight on it, was located within the back seat of the vehicle.
The murder weapon was a high-powered Bushmaster's rifle, the civilian version of the military rifle Mohammed knew so well. For the police, this was an essential find. Ballistics would later link it to at least 11 of the shootings. If they hadn't found it, Mohammed and Malvo could have got away with murder. The psychological reasons behind this degree of preparation is explained by clinical psychologist Evan Nelson.
All of this shows extraordinary planning. They were very careful to set themselves up to do shootings in ways that they could make a quick and rapid exit. They even came back to inspect the scenes while the police were investigating it. This shows an amazing degree of calculation and awareness of the wrongfulness of what they were doing in order to avoid detection, and even a willing to flirt with the possibility of being caught because of that sense of supremacy that they could get away with this.
John Mohammed was examined by court-appointed psychiatrists, but the findings were never admitted as evidence in court, so the motivation for these heinous crimes will never truly be known. By attempting to extort $10 million from the American government, one theory is that money was their motive. Lee told his psychologists that if they wanted to understand him, they should watch the film The Matrix. Keanu Reeves' character is chosen by an older, charismatic mentor to lead a revolution against an evil regime that had enslaved humanity.
John Allen Muhammad has been carried out under the laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Wonderful.
Death was pronounced at 9:11 p.m. 9:11 p.m.
9:11 p.m.
Jones. Show me the way, show me the way. Lord, show me. Jones. Show me the way, show me the way. Show me the way, show me the way.